The day my son told me he wasn't mine, he didn't raise his voice. He handed me an envelope and said thank you. That was the moment I understood something. I hadn't lost a son. I had been used. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the house had become. Not the peaceful kind of quiet people talk about when they mean rest. This was the kind of quiet that lets old memories walk around freely, opening doors you thought you had closed years ago. The refrigerator hummed, the clock on the wall ticked too loudly. And somewhere between those sounds, I realized something had gone missing long before my son ever handed me that envelope. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you who I was before I became the man people stopped calling Dad. My name is Tree, and for more than 20 years, I worked as a night security guard at a public school on the edge of town. No badge of honor, no pension worth mentioning, just a uniform that smelled like old coffee and rain, and a flashlight I replaced with my own money when it broke. My wife died when our son was still small. After that, the world didn't ask if I was ready. It just kept moving. I learned how to pack lunches, how to braid clumsy hair, how to sit through parent-teacher meetings pretending I wasn't exhausted from working all night. I didn't raise my son to be grateful. I raised him to be strong. I told myself gratitude would come on its own. When he got into college, I sold the little house we lived in. It wasn't big, but it was ours. I signed the papers with hands that shook more than I expected. The check was for just over $200,000, and every cent of it went to him. Tuition, living expenses. A fresh start, I told him. After that, I moved into a rented room behind a hardware store. It didn't bother me, not really. As long as my son stood tall, I could sleep anywhere. Years passed. He became successful, more successful than I ever imagined. He wore suits now, drove a clean car, spoke with confidence about investments, clients, futures. When neighbors asked about him, I smiled like it was my own accomplishment. But somewhere along the way, the calls grew shorter. Visits turned into excuses. And then one day, without a fight, without an argument, I was no longer invited into his world. "Dad," he said once, carefully choosing his words, "you don't really fit in at my office. My clients wouldn't understand." I laughed like it was nothing. Of course they wouldn't. I didn't fit anywhere anymore. I told myself this was normal. Children grow. Parents fade into the background. That's how life works. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I still believed that when it truly mattered, blood would remember blood. I didn't know yet that blood was the least important thing in this story. All I wanted, truly wanted, was to be allowed to remain his father in name, if nothing else. I didn't know that, to him, I had already finished serving my purpose. And I certainly didn't know that this quiet life, this invisible existence, was just the opening chapter of a revenge story I never intended to be part of, but would never escape once it began. Success didn't change my son all at once. That's the part people rarely talk about. It didn't happen with a fight. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatic goodbye. It happened quietly, the same way rust eats through metal, slow enough that you don't notice until the structure is already weak. At first, he was just busy. That was the word he used every time I called. Busy with meetings, busy with clients, busy building a future. I understood. Of course I did. I had spent my whole life being busy for him. Our phone calls became shorter. 5 minutes turned into 2, then into texts, then into nothing unless I reached out first. When he finally invited me to see his office, I wore my cleanest shirt, the one I only used for weddings and funerals. I remember standing in the lobby, looking at the glass walls and polished floors, feeling like I had stepped into a world that spoke a language I didn't know. The receptionist smiled politely when I gave my son's name. She asked who I was there to see. "My son," I said. She hesitated, then made a call. A few minutes later, my son appeared. But he didn't smile the way he used to. He walked faster than I remembered, eyes scanning the room like he was already thinking about his next appointment. "Dad," he said quietly, pulling me aside, "you don't really need to come here anymore. My clients wouldn't understand." He said it gently, carefully, like he was explaining something obvious to a child. I laughed and told him it was fine, that I just wanted to see the place, that I was proud of him, and I meant it. From that day on, I stopped showing up unannounced. I stopped asking questions. I learned how to make myself smaller so he could feel bigger. But there were other signs, ones I pretended not to see. My grandson stopped calling me Grandpa. At first, he called me by my name, stumbling over it like it didn't quite belong to me. Then one day, without malice, without explanation, he started calling me Uncle. I remember nodding like it didn't hurt. If you're listening to this right now, let me ask you something. Have you ever told yourself, "It's fine," when it clearly wasn't? Have you ever swallowed a moment because you didn't want to be a burden? That's what I did. I told myself this was normal, that children grow up and parents step back, that love doesn't need proof, only patience. I told myself that as long as he was successful, my sacrifices had meaning. But meaning, I would later learn, is fragile when it's one-sided. The distance grew wider. Holidays were postponed. Dinners were canceled. When I did see him, his phone stayed face down on the table, buzzing silently like a reminder that something else always mattered more. Once, I asked him if I had done something wrong. He looked genuinely confused. "No, Dad," he said. "You just don't really fit into this part of my life." That sentence stayed with me. Not angry, not cruel, just final. I went back to my rented room that night and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. I tried to remember when I had stopped being part of his life and started becoming something he needed to manage. I didn't know it then, but this was the moment everything quietly shifted. The moment I went from being his father to being an inconvenience he hadn't yet found the courage to let go of. Hospitals have a way of making time feel thinner. The walls were the same dull color everywhere, the kind meant to calm people down, but somehow did the opposite. Machines beeped softly. Shoes squeaked against the floor. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about nothing in particular, when my son walked in. He didn't rush. He didn't look worried. He looked prepared. His suit was pressed. His hair was neat. He pulled a chair close to the bed but didn't sit right away. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and took out a thick envelope. Plain, white, no name on it. He placed it gently on my chest. "I need you to read this," he said. There was no anger in his voice. No hesitation either. On the front of the envelope, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "Dad, I'm not your son." I remember noticing how steady my hands were as I opened it. That surprised me. I had expected shaking or fear or something dramatic. But there was nothing, just paper. Inside were test results, medical language, numbers, a signature at the bottom, and a date. The test had been done 12 years ago. I stared at that date longer than anything else on the page. 12 years ago. The same year I sold the house. The same year I handed him everything I had so he could start his business. The same year I told myself a father's job was to disappear quietly once his child no longer needed him. I looked up at him. "You've known since then," I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't deny it. "I needed time," he replied. "Time to build something, to get where I am." "For 12 years?" I asked. He shrugged, just slightly. "I needed to use what you gave me." That was the moment something inside me went completely still. Not shattered, not broken. Still. A nurse walked in then, checking the monitor by my bed. As she moved, something slipped from my son's jacket pocket and fell to the floor. She bent down, picked it up without thinking. "Oh," she said casually, glancing at it. "Your insurance card. It's still under his name. Looks like he's been paying it for years." She set it on the table and walked out. My son didn't look at me. For a brief second, his face froze, just enough for the truth to catch up with him. Then it passed, and the mask returned. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just folded the papers neatly and placed them back into the envelope. "So," I said quietly, "all those years I thought I was helping my son stand on his own." He nodded. "And you did." "I was really just a step," I finished. "Something you climbed until you didn't need it anymore." He stood up. "I didn't come here to argue," he said. "I came to make things clear. There are people in my life now. Partners, clients, a family. I can't have questions about my background." I looked at him for a long time. "Then why bring this now?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just a fraction of a second." "Because you're getting older," he said. "And I don't want complications later." Complications. That was what 20 years of night shifts, packed lunches, and silent sacrifices had become. He turned toward the door. As he left, I noticed something strange. For the first time in his life, he didn't say goodbye. I lay there after he was gone, listening to the machines again. The room felt larger somehow, emptier. It wasn't the test results that hurt the most. It was realizing that the truth hadn't destroyed our relationship. It had only revealed what it had already become. I was discharged 2 days later. No flowers, no calls. Just a nurse handing me papers and reminding me to take my medication with food. I nodded like I always did, even though I wasn't sure I remembered how to eat when no one was waiting on the other side of the table. The room I rented was small. One window, one bed, a dresser that wobbled if you pulled the drawer too hard. I sat down and listened to the building breathe. Pipes knocked. Someone upstairs laughed. Life kept going with a kind of confidence I didn't recognize anymore. I laid the envelope on the bed. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. The weight of it was enough. I went through my things slowly, not looking for anything in particular. Old receipts, a pair of shoes I should have thrown away years ago, a photo album with corners bent from being moved too many times. My son at 5, missing a front tooth. My son at 10, holding a trophy too big for his hands. My son at 18, smiling like the world had already agreed to let him win. I wondered when that smile had stopped including me. I found the papers from the house sale folded neatly in a folder. I remembered signing them, the pen heavy in my hand, the agent asking if I was sure. I had laughed then. I had said something about children being worth more than walls. I didn't feel foolish now. Just tired. That night I tried to call him. I hung up before it rang. The next morning I tried again. This time it rang twice. then went to voicemail. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know which version of myself would speak if I did. The father, the stranger, or the man who finally understood he had been useful longer than he had been loved. I sat at the small table and started writing him a letter. Not an angry one, not a pleading one. Just words, simple ones. I told him I hoped he was well. I told him I wasn't sick anymore. I told him I didn't blame him. Halfway through, I stopped. I read the letter once. Then I tore it cleanly in half. Then again, until the pieces were too small to read. I put them in the trash and didn't look back. That was the moment it settled in. Not that he wasn't my son, but that I had been something else to him all along. A bridge, a rung, a temporary solution to a permanent ambition. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the need to. The pain had already done its work. It had burned through the parts of me that still expected fairness. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, the same way I had in the hospital. Only this time, there were no machines, no footsteps, no interruptions, just quiet. And in that quiet, I understood something I hadn't before. You can survive heartbreak. What's harder to survive is realizing that the love you thought was shared had always been transactional, and that the bill had come due without warning. I turned off the light, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't wait for sleep to come quickly. I let it take its time. There is a moment, after grief has burned itself out, when something quieter takes its place. It isn't hope. It isn't forgiveness. It's clarity. That moment came to me on an ordinary morning. I woke before sunrise, made coffee in a chipped mug, and realized I hadn't thought about calling my son. Not even once. The urge was gone. Not buried. Gone. That's when I understood I wasn't healing. I was reclaiming something. I began with small decisions, the kind no one applauds, but that changed the shape of a life. I stopped keeping my phone beside the bed. I cleaned out a drawer I'd avoided for years. I folded clothes I no longer needed and gave them away without telling anyone. Then I made the bigger decision. I went to a lawyer's office 2 bus stops away. The building was old, the carpet worn thin near the door. The lawyer was younger than my son. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if he expected me to change my mind. I didn't. We talked about a will. He asked if I had children. I said yes, then corrected myself. I raised a son, I told him. That's not the same thing anymore. I didn't leave everything to bitterness. That would have been easy. Instead, I left nothing to the man who had already taken enough. The money I had left wasn't much compared to what I once handed over. But it was mine now. For the first time in years, it was truly mine. I directed it to a small fund that helped elderly parents who'd been quietly abandoned. Men and women who had given their best years away and were left wondering what they had done wrong. I didn't want my name on a plaque. I didn't want recognition. I just wanted the money to go somewhere it would be understood. The lawyer looked up from his notes. "You're sure?" he asked. I nodded. "I've already paid what I owed," I said. "This part is for me." After that, life slowed down in a way I hadn't expected. I moved to a quieter place, smaller, cleaner, somewhere no one knew my history and no one asked questions I didn't want to answer. I learned new routines, morning walks, afternoon naps, books I'd never had time to read. I wasn't running from the past. I was finally walking without carrying it. Sometimes I thought about my son, not with anger, not even with sadness, just distance. Like thinking about a town you once lived in but no longer recognize. I didn't wish him harm. I didn't wish him regret. I wished him exactly what he had chosen. A life built on ambition, unburdened by gratitude. And in choosing to step away, I learned something I wish I had known earlier. Self-respect doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself with speeches or dramatic exits. It comes quietly, when you decide, finally, that being used is not the same as being loved, and that you are allowed to stop offering yourself to someone who has already taken everything they wanted. That decision didn't make me younger, but it made me lighter. And for the first time in a long while, I slept without feeling like I owed anyone anything. Years passed without announcing themselves. They slipped by the way quiet mornings do. One cup of coffee at a time, one slow walk around the block, one ordinary night of sleep. I didn't count them. I didn't need to. Time had finally stopped feeling like something I owed. Then one afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I knew who it would be before I opened it. My son stood there, thinner than I remembered. The confidence was still present, but it had cracks now. The kind you can't hide with a good suit. He looked past me, as if expecting the old room, the old life, the version of me that waited. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat at the small table. No tea, no ceremony, just two people facing what had been avoided for a long time. He talked first, about business deals that fell apart, partners who walked away, a marriage that didn't survive success the way he thought it would. He spoke carefully, as if choosing words that wouldn't cost him more than he could afford. Finally, he stopped. "I made mistakes," he said. "I didn't realize what I was losing." I listened. I really did. But something had changed in me. Something that didn't rise to meet guilt or bend toward regret. "You realized," I said gently, "when there was nothing left to take." He flinched. I stood and went to the drawer by the window. Inside was a single envelope, not the one he had given me years ago. This one was thinner, lighter. I placed it on the table. Inside was a short letter. No accusations, no anger, just the truth. "I don't hate you. I don't resent you. But I won't carry what you chose to leave behind. A debt paid cannot be reclaimed by regret." He read it twice, then a third time. "Is this it?" he asked. "It's enough," I said. He looked at me then, not the way a son looks at a father, but the way a man looks at a closed door. "I thought you'd fight," he said quietly. I shook my head. "I already did," I replied. "You just didn't notice." When he left, there was no shouting, no tears, just the soft click of the door returning to its place. That night I slept well, not because justice had been loud or satisfying, but because it had finally been complete. The kind that doesn't make headlines, the kind that settles deep and stays there. People think revenge has to look a certain way, dramatic, destructive, final. But this wasn't that kind of revenge story. This was quieter. This was a man choosing not to be used again. Before we part, let me ask you something. Just you, listening right now. Have you ever given everything to someone who later decided it didn't count? Have you ever been told, politely, that your sacrifices were inconvenient? If so, remember this. Walking away with your dignity intact is not weakness. It's the last strength you ever need. And sometimes, that's the only ending that truly lasts. I never heard from my son again. No calls, no letters, no updates passed through distant relatives or old acquaintances. Maybe he moved on. Maybe he didn't. I stopped wondering which. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the boy he once was. The one who fell asleep on my shoulder during long bus rides. The one who called my name like it was the safest place in the world. I don't know if he ever understood what he lost. I only know what I kept. And that, for the first time in my life, was enough.